We start the class. All of you, for a moment, just close your eyes and offer your silence to God as a prayer of thanksgiving, especially for the wonderful and the most precious gift of us, that is the gift of life which He has given us, especially to come across this whole year, this pandemic year, and into a new year, a new beginning. Lord, we thank you and we ask your blessings for this new year, and also ask and thank you at the same time for the near and dear ones, for the gift of life and keeping them healthy and well. And also this year too, Lord, we ask your graces and blessings for us to be healthy and also guide us throughout the year so that we may make the best use of this wonderful gift what you have granted us. So let us start the chapter. The lesson which I did last year it is, of course, we are into a new year, an angel in disguise. I'm just going to complete it. And for all those who have not done this with me in the class, I'm going to just give, I'll recapitulate for you a little bit, and I'm going to continue it, the story, and tomorrow I'll be doing the poems. I'm also recording the lesson here so that the girls who are not here, and as well as for you also, I'll give the link and I'll upload it in the YouTube. Let me see the recording today, and all my classes also I'm going to record it and put in the YouTube, so that whoever misses, and they have a lot of problem, I know, genuine problems, no phone, sometimes timings are not matching. So let me be back to the story, An Angel in Disguise. As I told you, it's a story about an invalid girl, an invalid child, Maggie, a girl who is left all alone and is abandoned by everyone after her mother's death. Children, I will admit you as you keep coming, so don't worry. In between, I might pause to admit you all. And Ritika will let me know if I'm audible or inaudible, okay?
Okay.
So, as Maggie, as I told you, she is an invalid child, and after her mother's death, she is abandoned by all, whereas her other brother and sister, she has a brother, John. He is taken up by a farmer, Jones, and because I think he will be helpful in his farm, so this farmer Jones takes him up, and Mrs. Ellis takes care of, she wants to take care of Katie, her sister, because she wanted a bound girl, and for her it might be beneficial, but nobody would like to take an invalid sick child, that is Maggie. So she is abandoned by everyone after the mother's death. All the villagers after the funeral leave, trying to avoid her, and they just leave her alone, and the cry of the villagers is that she should be taken to the poor house, okay, and where she will be taken care of. But you find there is a childless couple, that is Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, and Mr. Thompson is there, and he is unable to resist the pleading and tearful pleads of this invalid girl, this Maggie, who was really pleading him not to leave him alone after all the villagers left after her mother's burial. So we are done to, I think we have done more, but still I recapitulated for the girls who have not, who were not there in the last class. So I'll be doing page number 79 from there. As I read the text and explain, I suppose you'll get the story, and in between some words are there which are difficult or which are not commonly used for you, and you don't use them every day. You can just jot down the meanings of it as I teach you, so that it becomes easy for you to do the question answers, to understand the story and the words and your workbook. So please take your pencil, as I tell you often in the class. And so I'm back to 79, page number 79, after the funeral. And I forgot to tell you that, of course, for the ones who were not there, Mr. Thompson, that is, he's a wheelwright. A wheelwright is a person actually who makes and repairs the wheels of all the wheeled vehicles. So in the village, all the villagers are there in the hovel. Hovel also I told you, in the poor house, small dirty house which is in a bad condition, where Maggie's mother and her other brother and sister stayed. And now the mother is dead and people have buried her, and they are back to that hovel, and where they decide, one of them decide, Mr. Jones, the farmer, decides to take away the Maggie's brother, that is John, and Mrs. Elvis takes Katie, her sister, but nobody takes this invalid girls. And you must have seen in the stories and must have come across, when people go to adopt any child, they would like to have somebody very pretty looking baby, or a pretty, like, not only the orphanage, even if they want to take anyone to adopt, they want to adopt anybody, they will like to have a healthy one. Who will go for an invalid child or a sickly person? It will be a burden. So here let us see why we have the title of the story, an angel in disguise, and who is the angel, and why she is in, why it is she is in disguise, why she is an angel in disguise. You must have already guessed, it is Maggie, and those who have already read. So let me come to the story. Okay, so you find here that Mr. Thompson is the only one left behind. He is left behind, and while all the villagers hurry after the burial, leaving alone Maggie, the invalid child, alone in this hovel, in the poor hut over there. It's a cruel thing to leave her so, and this is what Mr. Thompson feels, that it is a cruel thing to leave her alone. Then take her to the poor house, she'll have to go there, answered the blacksmith's wife, springing away and leaving Joe behind. So as the woman, somebody dies, everybody is gathered, and slowly after the burial they move away. So all are moving away. Some say that when Mr. Thompson, he says it's a cruel thing to leave her behind. One of the women in the village, she is a blacksmith's wife, as she moves away, she just left Joe behind. She says that take her to the poor house. If it's a cruel thing to leave her alone, take her to the poor house. So no, everybody is so very indifferent towards this invalid child, that is Maggie. For a little while, the man stood with a puzzled air. Then he turned back and went into the hovel again. So for a little while, this Joe Thompson, he stood confused, and then he turns back and again he goes into the hovel, that is the small dirty house which was in a bad condition, where this Maggie was lying. Maggie, with painful effort, had raised herself to an upright position and was sitting on the bed, straining her eyes upon the door, out of which all had just departed. A vague terror had come into her thin white face. So, as he turns back, he sees Maggie, with a painful effort. As I told you, she is a sick child, unable to move and walk. She, with great painful effort, she just manages to sit straight in an upright position and in the bed, and she was straining to see the door where all the other villagers had just departed after the funeral, one by one. Already her mother is dead, departed. She is no more in the world, left alone. And now even her brother and sister, not only she has lost her mother, now her brother and her sister also have been taken away, because there is no one to take care of them. Mother is no more there. And then only Maggie is left. A vague terror had come into her thin white face. Looking at that, she is terrorized, and you can see her. When we are fearful, your face becomes pale and white. So here, in a thin white face, you can see terror. She is full of fright. "Oh, Mr. Thompson," she cried out, catching her suspended breath. "Don't leave me here all alone." So she cries out to Mr. Thompson, "Oh, Mr. Thompson, please do not leave me alone here." Though rough in exterior, Joe Thompson, the wheelwright, had a heart, and it was very tender in some places. So, though Mr. Thompson, the childless couple, as I told you, here Mr. Thompson is here, though he looked outwardly in appearance to be rough, and but it seems that he had a tender heart. He had not tender heart. At some places it has been described, he has been described that at some places he was tender, meaning to say he did have a tender heart. He liked children and was pleased to have them come to his shop, where sleds and wagons were made or mended for the village lads without a draft on their hoarded sixpences. So he liked children and he was happy to have them at his shop. And as I told you, he is a wheelwright who mends and repairs the wheels of wheeled vehicles. So when the children, the boys of the village would come to his shop, he would mend them, and with all the money which they had, they used to pay him with the money. The lads, the village boys, of course, and children, of course, will hoard money, will collect or accumulate money, hide or store away some money. Isn't it? Mommy gives you some money, you store away some money from your pocket, pocket money. You just store some to keep to use. Maybe mommy was giving you to buy one chocolate, and you must have had only one and kept the other money, and somehow you have stored that money. So with that money, they used to pay him to get their wheels repaired. So he used to love the children. He used to be happy to have these boys of the village as they came to the shop. "No, dear," he answered in a kind voice, going to the bed and stooping down over the child. So when Maggie pleads to him that, "Please do not leave me here all alone," he says, "No, dear," and he answers in a very kind voice and goes to her bed, and then he bends down over the child. "You shan't be left here alone," he tells her. "You shan't be left here all alone." Then he wrapped her with the gentleness almost of a woman in the clean bed clothes which some neighbor had brought, and lifting her in his strong arms, bore her out into the air and across the field that lay between the hovel and his home. So he stoops over the child, he bends over the child, and he tells her in a kind voice that you shan't be left alone here, and he wraps her with the gentleness. He wraps gently, just like a woman. A man's manner and woman's manner is different, isn't it? Woman is more gentle. Okay, so he wraps this child, Maggie, in a very gentle way, like a woman, with the clean bed clothes which some of our neighbor had just brought, and he bore her. Bore her means he carried her into the air across the field. He carries her across the field that was between the hovel, that is the small dirty house of this Maggie, which was in a bad condition, and his house. I suppose you're getting, Ritika. Am I clear? Hello, Ritika?
Yes, miss.
Okay. Now, Joe Thompson's wife, who happened to be childless. Now, as I told you, Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Thompson, they are childless, was not a woman of saintly temper, nor much given to self-denial for others' good, and Joe had well-grounded doubts touching the manner of greeting. So now, as I told you, Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Thompson were childless. They had no children. Okay. And now we are told about Mrs. Thompson's nature, that she is not of a saintly temper. She is not the one, you find sometimes people who are childless, grief. Hello, please mute your speakers. Kavya, Ketan. Okay. She was not saintly temper means she was not of a good temper, so nor much given to self-denial for others' good. She was not a person who would sacrifice things for others, she would not deny her things to be sacrificed at the cost of others. And Joe had well-grounded doubts, and Joe had doubts that he would be greeted well by his wife when he is carrying this invalid Maggie to his home. So he knew that his wife would not be in good temper, and he wouldn't be greeted well for bringing Maggie into the house. he should receive on his arrival. So he knew very well when he would arrive, he would not get a very good greeting from his wife because as I told you about her nature and about her temper. Mrs. Thompson saw him approaching from the window and with the ruffling feathers met him a few paces from the door as he opened the garden gate and came in. So Mrs. Thompson already sees her husband, Mr. Thompson, carrying this Maggie, this invalid child, and from her window, and with the ruffling feathers, means I'm being irritated, ruffling feathers here is being irritated. As Mr. Thompson approaches, she meets him a few paces just before he approaches the door. So he opened the garden gate and he gets inside. He bore a precious burden and he felt it to be so. So it is now here you come to know the description of Maggie is so well described. He bore a precious burden. Who is this precious burden? It is Maggie, the invalid child. So he is carrying this precious burden and he felt it to be so, and he did feel that this burden is a precious one as his arms held the sick child to his breast. So as he held the burden, that is the precious burden, he says to Maggie, the invalid child, to his breast like this, as he bore a precious burden and he felt it to be so. As his arms held the sick child to his breast, a sphere of tenderness went out from her and penetrated his feelings. So as his arms just held the sick child to his breast, a sphere of tenderness went out of her. A sphere of tenderness just went out and it got inside, deep inside his feelings. You know, as you hold the baby to your breast, some sweet little baby, you will love that baby the moment you hold it close to your breast. So similarly, when he held her close to his breast, a sphere of tenderness came out of her and penetrated his feeling. A bond had already corded itself around them both. So there was already a bond between Mr. Thompson and this invalid child, that is Maggie. And a cord had already bound them. It had tied them in a bond of, and love was springing into life. And this bond between Thompson and this invalid child, that is Maggie, a bond of love was already springing between these two. What have you there? Sharply questioned Mrs. Thompson. And the wife, Mrs. Thompson, she sharply questions Mr. Thompson that what have you there? What is there with you? What are you carrying? She means to say. Joe felt the child start and shrink against him, and Joe could feel that Maggie, as he held her close to his breast, that she shrunk, you know, and because his wife sharply, she was scared now, and she shrunk and close to him. He did not reply. Mr. Thompson does not reply to his wife, except by a look that was pleading and cautionary, that said, wait a moment for explanations and be gentle. So he did not reply to his wife, but just gave a look that was just requesting or pleading and cautioning her that you should wait for a moment for explanations and you be gentle. So the look of his could be, she could read that it pleaded of her husband, it pleaded that she should wait for explanation, that what is he carrying, and he has also the look demanded that she should be gentle. And passing in, carried Maggie to the small chamber on the first floor and laid her on a bed. And so he just crosses his wife, he passes his wife and goes to the small chamber on the first floor, and he lays Maggie on a bed. Then stepping back, he shut the door and stood face to face with his vinegar-tempered wife in the passageway outside. So he, after he places Maggie in the chamber in the bed, then he steps back, closes the door, and he's out in the passageway outside, and then now he happens to meet his wife face to face. And his wife, of course, as I told, she has no saintly temper. She is her temper has been described as vinegar tempered. Vinegar, all have tasted. Is it sweet or sour? It is sour. So a person who is not very pleasant and sweet will be called as a sour personality, isn't it? A sour face, a swollen face. Yes, not very sweet. Okay. So he has to face his wife now, face to face, vinegar tempered wife in the passageway. And the wife says, "You haven't brought home that sick brat?" Anger and astonishment were in the tones of Mrs. Joe Thompson, and her face was inflamed. And now, when both are alone, she says, "I hope so you haven't brought that sick brat in our home." And there was anger and also surprise in the tones of Mrs. Joe Thompson, and her face was lit up in anger. "I think women's hearts are sometimes very hard," said Joe. And then sarcastically her husband says that, "I think women's hearts are sometimes very hard. Women are supposed to be known to be soft-hearted. Yes, they melt at any, any sorrow, any grief or anything, but men are supposed to be hard." So now he sarcastically says that women's hearts are sometimes very hard. Usually Joe Thompson got out of his wife's way or kept rigidly silent and non-combative when she fired up on any subject. So here we come to know another aspect of Mr. Johnson's nature. He usually used to be away from his wife's way, or he used to keep quiet whenever she wanted to fire. Yes, I'm admitting girls, so in between I'll break. Okay. He used to keep silent whenever, and was never eager to fight. Non-combative means not eager to fight whenever she used to fire up on any subject. Any subject, any husband-wife, one has to keep quiet when the other one fires, or when somebody is in arguing mood or she is firing on any subject. Okay. If they both fire each other, what will happen? There will be a big world war. So in order to avoid fight and a big world war, you can say, one of the couple keeps quiet, isn't it? So this Mr. Johnson, whenever your wife used to fire on any subject, he usually used to keep silent and be of his wife's way. And he was never eager to fight back that time whenever she used to fire on any subject. It was with some surprise, therefore, that she now encountered a firmly set countenance and a resolute pair of eyes. And somehow, this time the wife noticed that usually the husband used to keep away from his wife's way whenever she used to fire on any subject, when she used to get angry on any subject, or he was never eager to fight back with her. But now she was surprised that he encountered a firmly set countenance, means he had a firm face now and a resolute pair of eyes, a firm stand he took. Through his eyes she could see that he is taking a firm stand. Okay. Women's hearts are not half so hard as men's. So now the wife says, Mrs. Thompson says, that women's hearts are not half as hard as men's. She says, she means to say that women are still not as hard as men. So like any time, like when you have somebody just comments you like girls are very stupid or foolish, you will automatically try to defend the girls and at once come up and say boys are still foolish, still more foolish than the girls, isn't it? So here you find that earlier Mr. Thompson had said that women, it seems that women's heart is no more half hard as men. So now it's her turn. She tells that women's hearts are not as half as hard as men's, meaning to say women are soft. They are not as hard as men's heart. Joe saw by a quick intuition that his resolute bearing had impressed his wife, and he answered quickly and with real indignation, "Be that as it may, every woman at the funeral turned her eyes steadily from the sixth child's face, and when the cart went off with her dead mother, hurried away and left her all alone in that old hut with the sun not an hour in the sky. So Joe sees that his wife, with quick intuition I suppose you get, to know something by using one's feelings rather than knowing the facts. Like for example, you say that because you didn't expect your auntie, but she happens to come, and you said, by intuition, I had an intuition that you will come. So, you can even say that my intuition somehow said that you are coming up for the party. Like, okay, nobody has told that she's going to come to the party or your birthday party, but your intuition, you have the feeling that she would come. So here by intuition, Joe says that his resolute bearing, resolute here is of course the firm stand he took, had impressed his wife, and he answered quickly and with real indignation. Indignation is a feeling of anger and surprise. He says that, be that as it may, every woman at the funeral turned her eyes steadily from the sick child's face. He tells his wife that at the funeral, every woman in the funeral of Maggie's mother's Maggie's mother, every woman had turned her eyes. Nobody was soft as like a woman. Nobody pitied her. They just avoided her seeing Maggie, this sick child's face. And when the cart went off with her dead mother, after the cart went off with the dead mother, everybody hurried away. All the women of the village hurried away and left her alone in that old hut. And the sun was not an hour in the sky. And it was just getting dark. The sun had set. Where were John and Kate? Asked Mrs. Thompson. So he tells his wife what had happened after the funeral and how the other villagers turned their eyes away from this sick child, that is Maggie. And then the wife inquires from her husband that where were John and Kate, that is the brother and sister of Maggie. Farmer Jones tossed John into his wagon and drove off. Just as we toss a coin in the air, here Farmer Jones has been describing as tossing John into his wagon. Just put John on his wagon and drove away. And Katie went home with his Mrs. Ellis. But nobody wanted the poor sick one. And then he tells his wife that nobody wanted this poor sick one. Send her to the poorhouse was the cry. And everybody in the other villagers at the funeral, they cried that she should be sent to the poorhouse. Why didn't you let her go then? What did you bring her here for? And then she asks her husband that why didn't you let her go to the poorhouse? What did you bring her here for? And what did you bring this sick child here in our home? She can't walk to the poorhouse, said Joe. And what does the husband say? Well, she is invalid. She cannot walk to the poorhouse. Somebody's arms must carry her. And mine are strong enough for that task. And he tells his wife, he gives a nice tit for tat answer saying that my arms are very nice of him. She cannot walk. She is invalid. So somebody's arms has to carry her. And mine are strong. He says, my arms are quite strong enough for that task. For the task of what? For carrying this sick child. So now you come to know another nice character of quality of Mr. Thompson. He seems to be a strong and a very kind man. Then why didn't you keep on? Why did you stop here? Demanded the wife. Then the wife, as you know, the husband and wife, you must have heard a tiff or a fight going on in the conversation if you have heard. So the wife now demands, then if your arms were strong enough to carry her to the poorhouse, why did you stop here to our house? Why didn't you carry her to the poorhouse? Why did you stop at our place? Okay. Because I am not apt to go on fool's errands. The guardians must first be seen and a permit obtained. And the husband now replies to her wife, saying, well, I am not a fool to go to a fool's errands. Here is any work that has no hope of being done successfully. So he said, well, I did not go to the poorhouse because this task of my going to the poorhouse would not be successful, as the guardians must be first seen. To go to the poorhouse, you first need guardians, so that the child has to be kept there. Now, if you are staying with your grandparents here and studying, I have come across many students, or your aunt, and your parents stay somewhere else just for your schooling. If you are staying here, your grandparents or your aunts are your guardians. So, for a poor house, when you keep, you need a guardian. So, he said the guardians must be seen, and also a permit has to be obtained. There was no gainsaying this. There was no use saying this, because then when will you see the guardians? Because the wife again tells, then when are you going to see the guardians? Was asked with irrepressible impatience. So this question again was asked by her wife, that when are you going to see the guardians? And she just asked with uncontrollable impatience, tomorrow. So the husband says, tomorrow. Why put it off till tomorrow? Go at once for the permit and get the whole thing off your hands tonight. She tells her husband, why are you waiting for tomorrow? Get it right now. Get the permit and get the whole thing out of your hands just tonight. Means finish off all your work tonight itself. Why tomorrow? Jane, and then he says, Jane, set the wheel right, with an impressiveness of tone that greatly subdued his wife. The way he says Jane in such an impressive tone that the wife is under control, And he tells his wife, he quotes the Bible and gives a reference from the Bible to his wife. I read in the Bible sometimes. So in the Bible you will come across, and in the Children's Day I did read this Bible for you, this passage from the Bible. I read in the Bible sometimes and find much said about little children. How the Savior rebuked the disciples who would not receive them. So he tells his wife that I have been reading in the Bible sometimes, and he finds that about children, about small children, how the Savior, that is, Savior is Jesus Christ, he rebuked the disciples, he scolded the disciples, he scolded his disciples who would not receive them. The children were coming to Jesus, and the disciples scolded the children for worrying Jesus or coming towards Jesus. But Jesus scolds the disciples for not allowing the children to come to him. How he took them up in his arms. And you must have seen a picture also in our school at times. Jesus is sitting and his children are surrounded, small children are all around him, and he has taken one child in his arms and blessed them, and he blessed them. And how he said, whosoever gave them even a cup of cold water should not go unrewarded. And he tells his wife about this passage from the Bible, that how Jesus scolded the disciples for not allowing the children to come to him, and that how he took them in his arms and he blessed the children, and how he said that whoever is going to give them even a cup of water, cold water, will be rewarded. He will not go unrewarded. Now, it is a small thing for us to keep this poor motherless little one for a single night. Now, by giving reference from the Bible, he tells his wife that now this is a very small thing for us to keep this poor motherless little girl for a single night, to be kind to her for a single night, to make her little comfortable for a single night. So, by giving reference from the Bible, that he says we need to just be kind and make her comfortable just for a single night. The voice of the strong, rough man shook. Now Mr. Johnson's voice, this strong and rough looking man, even his voice shook. When does our voice shake? When we are nervous, or when we are sad, about to cry, or when we are crying. And he turned his head away, and so he turns his head away so that the moisture in his eyes might not be seen. And he turns his head away so that his moisture, means his tears or his wet eyes, will not be seen. Mrs. Thompson did not answer, but a soft feeling crept into her heart. But somehow a soft feeling crept into her heart as her husband gave reference from the Bible and pleaded her to be kind and to do something nice for a single night, to be kind to this motherless girl. Look at her kindly, Jane. Speak to her kindly, said Joe. And he tells his wife, look at her kindly. Please look at her kindly and speak to her kindly. Think of a dead mother and the loneliness, the pain, the sorrow that must be on all her coming life. You think about all the loneliness and the pain and the sorrow which will all come in her coming life. The softness of his heart gave unwanted eloquence to his lips. So he said all this to his wife, and he was very kind and soft in his heart, looking at this invalid child, this tearful child. He felt sorrowful, and his heart gave this, though he was not this usual self, being so kind, speaking so kindly and so gently. Sorry, his heart gave unusual ability. Unwanted is here is unusual. Eloquence to his lips means ability to speak well. So he is able to speak. Usually he doesn't speak so well, like so kindly, so in such a kind way, but very unusually, because his heart was soft. Sometimes you also are surprised the way words come out of your mouth automatically from your heart. When you see somebody in pain and the way you speak about the pain and you feel so pity. So similarly, his heart is soft and kind towards this girl, and therefore all this, he's got this ability to speak to his wife, telling her unusual ability, speaking to her, telling her to be kind, to look at this Maggie in a very kind way and speak to her kindly, and think. He tells her to think about the loneliness and the pain and the sorrow she will undergo in the future life. Mrs. Thompson did not reply, but presently turned towards the little chamber where her husband had deposited Maggie. So Mrs. Thompson at this does not reply anything to her husband, but she turns her towards the chamber where Maggie is laid, and pushing open the door went quietly in, and she just pushes the door and gets inside the door where Maggie is there. Joe did not follow, and the husband did not follow her. He saw that her state had changed and felt that it would be best to leave her alone with the child. And he also noticed that the wife, her state has changed after he made her see her sorrow and pain, and he pleaded. And then he saw the change in his wife, and he did not follow her. She went alone inside the chamber where Maggie was laid in the bed, and then he felt that he should leave Maggie and her wife there alone. Okay. So he went to his shop, and so he goes to his shop, which stood near the house, which was close to his house, and worked until dusky. Evening released him from labor, and he kept on working at his shop until it was dusky, somewhat dark, and evening somehow made him quit from his hard work. A light shining through the little chamber windows was the first object that attracted Joe's attention on turning towards the house. So, after his work, as he was returning, a light from the window was the first thing which attracted his attention when he looked into his house. It was a good omen, it was a good sign. The path led him by this windows, and when opposite, he could not help pausing to look in. The path the way which led him to this windows, and when opposite, he could not help pausing to look in. He could not stop looking inside it. It was now dark enough outside to screen him from observation. Now, it was quite dark, as I told you now, and he couldn't be seen from observation out from outside. Maggie was lying, what he could see was Maggie was lying a little raised. You know, when we are sick, people put some pillow so that we can raise our head and sit there in the bed, raised on the pillow with the lamp shining full upon her face. And opposite, when he's facing the door and looking at Maggie, he could see Maggie's face, but not his wife, because his wife's face is just behind. So he could see Maggie's face, and the lamp was shining full on her face. Mrs. Thompson was sitting by the bed, and he could see his wife sitting by the bed. She was sitting by the bed, talking to the child. But her back was towards the window. So his wife's back was towards the window, so he could not see his wife's face. But he could see Maggie's face, which was shining full upon her, the lamp was, as the lamp was shining full upon her face, so that her countenance was not seen. And so she was, the wife was facing back towards the window, and her face could not be seen, countenance's face. From Maggie's face, therefore, Joe must read the character of the intercourse. So now he cannot see his wife's face, but he can see Maggie's face. And now he does not know what these two are talking, so he has to see Maggie's face and get to know. Through the face we can read and understand what's happening and what they must be talking, whether they are angry, whether they're sad, or what kind of conversation. So Joe has to just read the character of their, you can say, exchange of, they're talking or what the conversation is. So here it means the connection, or what they are between these two. So he has to just get to know the character, what's the feelings between the two through the face of Maggie. He saw that her eyes were intently fixed upon his wife, and what he notices is Maggie's face was constantly fixed on his wife's face, and now and then a few words came, as if in answers from her lips. And now and then he could hear a few words as if she is answering from her lips. Means few words from her lips came as if she is answering to some questions. That her expression was sad and tender, and her expression was sad and tender. But he saw nothing of bitterness or pain. Even some words he could hear from his wife which seemed that it was sad and tender, and he did not hear any words which were full of bitterness or pain. A deep drawn breath was followed by one of relief, as a weight lifted itself from his heart. Now he is relieved to find that his wife is soft and kind towards Maggie. So, a big lift, when you are burdened, or you feel as there is some weight in your heart. Now he feels that weight is now unburdened, and he's feeling light and relieved as he finds that his wife is kind and is good. She has bonded well with Maggie. On entering, we have time, because 1:45 though it is, but we started late. So I'll finish off the chapter. Ritika, is it fine?
Yes.
Okay. So you can, in between, when you get the words only you have to write, otherwise you follow your story. On entering, Joe did not go immediately to the little chamber. Okay, so now he sees that his wife and Maggie are talking, and he gets from their face from Maggie's face that, and he's relieved that his wife is now no more bitter, and she's not finding Maggie a painful burden, but she's finding that she's tender and also sad. On entering, Joe did not go at once to the little chamber where Maggie and his wife is. His heavy tread about the kitchen brought his wife somewhat hurriedly from the room where she had been with Maggie. So somehow he goes directly to the kitchen, I suppose, and when he's walking, the heavy tread, when you walk heavily, that heavy tread, the wife hears of her husband in the kitchen, so she leaves the room where she was with Maggie and goes to the kitchen. Joe thought it best not to refer to the child, not to manifest any concern with regard to her. So now when the wife comes to the kitchen, she finds the husband there. Joe, the husband, does not feel that he should talk about the child or refer about Maggie, and he just not to manifest any concern regarding to her. When manifest here is show by one's act or appearance. He did not show as if through his talk or his appearance or act that he is concerned regarding Maggie. How soon will supper be ready? Okay, he asked, and he just tells, so he doesn't speak anything about the Maggie or the child. He says, how soon will supper be ready, to his wife. Right soon, answered Mrs. Thompson, beginning to bustle about. There was no asperity in her voice. So the wife replies that right soon your supper will be ready, and she started being busy again with the dinner, with the supper. Supper, I told you, is an early dinner. There was no asperity. Okay, asperity is there was no harshness in her voice. After washing her from his hands and face, the dust and soil of work, Joe left the kitchen and went to the little bedroom. So after he washed his hands and face and whatever was dirty from the dust and soil of his work, he goes to the little bedroom. And his wife is busy in the kitchen, I suppose. A pair of large bright eyes looked up at him from the snowy bed. And whose eyes? It was Maggie's eyes. A large, bright eyes looked at him from the snowy bed. Snowy bed is, now don't say it's full of snow, it's white snow. Bed sheets must be like, like snow, white. Looked at him tenderly, gratefully, pleadingly. Now these eyes of Maggie looked at John tenderly, gratefully, gratefully for bringing him. Her eyes showed the gratefulness and pleadingly, and pleadingly, requestingly, how his heart swelled in his bosom, and then her looks made his heart swell in his chest. Bosom, of course, is the human chest, especially the front part of the chest. With what a quicker motion came the heartbeats, and he could feel that the heart movement became faster, and Joe sat down. So he sat down, and now for the first time, examining the thin frame of this little girl, Maggie. Carefully under the lamplight, he carefully looks at this thin frame, this thin figure of this sick child under the lamplight. He examines her and saw that it was an attractive face, and sees that it was an attractive face and full of a childish sweetness. And he could see that the face was full of childish sweetness, which suffering had not been able to obliterate, and where even in the suffering, the sickness had not been able to destroy. So for the first time, he examines her, this thin face of this child, that is Maggie, under the lamp, examines and sees that it was full of childish sweetness, just the sweetness of a child, and this child's sweetness was not destroyed by the sickness even, and suffering of her sickness. Your name is Maggie, he said, as he sat down and took her soft little hands in his. As he takes her soft hands in his, he asks her, he tells her, your name is Maggie, he asks her. Yes, sir, her voice struck a chord that quivered in a low strain of music. Yes, sir, she says. Her voice just struck a chord as if when you strike a music instrument that quivered in a low strain of music, that shook in a low strain of music. So her voice was just like as if it's a voice struck a chord and it quivered in a low strain of music. Have you been sick long? Sulik asked Maggie. Have you been sick for a long time? Yes, sir. What a sweet patient was in her tone when she says, yes, sir. He says that there was a sweet patience in her tone. Has the doctor been to see you? And he then inquires from Maggie, has a doctor been there to see you? He used to come, and Maggie tells him that he used to come, but not lately, but not now, but not recently. No, sir. Have you any pain? So Mr. Thompson inquires from Maggie, have you any pain? Sometimes, but not now, she says. Sometimes, but not now. When had you pain? And he inquires, when did you have pain? Okay. This morning my side ached and my back hurt when you carried me. So he says that this morning, when did you get pain? Then she said, this morning when you carried me, my side pain ached and my back also hurt when you carried me. So he says that it hurts you to be lifted or moved about. So now he could gather that whenever she is moved or she is lifted, it hurts her and it is painful for her. And then Maggie says, yes, sir. Your side doesn't ache now. So he inquires again, I hope so now it does, your side doesn't ache now. No, sir. Does it ache a great deal? Then he inquires again. He's concerned. He asks her again, does it pain a lot? Yes, sir, but it hasn't ached any since I've been on this soft bed. And then she tells, yes, sir, it aches a lot, but from the time I have been laid in this soft bed, it does not ache. The soft bed feels good. And so he says, well, the soft bed, her house is small, dirty, in a very bad condition. You can imagine the poor person will not have a soft bed to sleep. And moreover, she is sick. He says, the soft bed feels good for you. Oh, yes, sir, so good. What a satisfaction mingled with gratitude was in her voice. And again, her voice he could get, that there was such a lot of satisfaction in her voice, which was mixed with gratitude as she said, "Oh, yes, sir, this bed feels good for me." "Supper is ready," said Mrs. Thompson. So Mrs. Thompson, the wife, then enters the chamber and says that supper is ready, looking into the room a little while afterwards. And then Jo glanced from her wife's face to that of Maggie. She understood him and answered. Jo, the husband, now glances from his wife's face and then back to Maggie, and the wife understood that the husband is telling what about supper for this Maggie. "She can wait until we are done." And the wife replies, she understood his glances, and she says that Maggie can wait after we are finished, after we are done with the dinner. "Then I will bring her some things to eat. And then after we finish our supper, I will bring her something to eat." There was an effort at indifference on the part of Mrs. Thompson, but her husband had seen her through the window and understood that the coldness was assumed. Now, the wife did not want to show that she has become so affectionate or she has become so tender towards Maggie. So she made an effort to show indifference, but already the husband had seen the tenderness as he had come home, which had, and the kind conversation maybe which was going on between the two. Okay. It is about to be 2, but I think I'll finish. Ritika, is it fine? One page is left. So she tried to make an effort to show indifference towards the girl, but the husband already knows that both of them have been already I think they have bonded well, because into a tender bond, because when he reached home he found them both nicely together and conversing, and nothing he could see which was bitter, but it was of sadness and tenderness. So, though his wife did not notice him, Jo waited after sitting down to the table for his wife to introduce the subject uppermost in both of their thoughts. Now Jo waited at the table in the supper, as they sat for supper, and he waited for his wife so that she would bring the topic or introduce the subject, which was there in the uppermost in the thought. What was the subject? Uppermost. Both their subject was Maggie, I suppose, uppermost thing in both their thoughts. Both thought about Maggie. So he waited that his wife would introduce this subject, that is the subject of Maggie. But she kept silent on that theme. But she just did not speak anything about Maggie for many minutes, and he maintained a reserve. And he also just kept quiet, just reserved. At last she said abruptly. At last the wife says abruptly, "What are you going to do with the child?" "I thought you understood me, that she was to go to the poorhouse," replied Jo, as if surprised at her question. So when the wife asked, "What are you going to do with the child?" and Jo is now trying to be, like in a surprise, he's saying, "I thought you understood what I'm going to do. I'm going to take her to the poorhouse," he means to say. Mrs. Thompson looked rather strangely at her husband for sonic movements and then dropped her eyes. Mrs. Thompson's now, she looks very strangely now at her husband for some audible sounds, or sonic movements means sonic audible sound movements, and then she dropped her eyes. She does not look into her husband's eyes. The subject was not again referred to during the meal. After that they just had the supper, did not speak anything about the subject, that is Maggie. At its close, Mrs. Thompson toasted, and after they finished the supper, Mrs. Thompson, she toasted a slice of bread and softened it with milk and butter. Adding to this a cup of tea, she took them into Maggie and held the small waiter on which she had placed them, while the hungry child ate with every sign of pleasure. So she toasted a slice of bread with milk, softened it with butter and milk, and carried a cup of tea, and the child, that is Maggie, ate this with great pleasure. "Is it good?" asked Mrs. Thompson, seeing with what a keen relish the food was taken. Seeing that Maggie was taking the food, what she offered, in a very, with keen relish means with great enjoyment as she took the food, she asked the child, "Is it good?" If somebody is prepared, your mothers prepare um, a dish for you or a vegetable, and you are eating it with relish, that is, you are enjoying and eating, your mother will ask you, of course, is it good? Is this nice? Have I cooked well? So she asks, because the child is relishing it, she is having the food with great enjoyment, so she asks, is it good? The child paused, she stopped with the cup in her hand and answered with a look of gratitude, and she answered with a look of gratefulness that awoke to new life old human feelings which had been slumbering in her heart for half a score of years. You need to note this. So, the moment she asked Maggie, is it good? Because she saw her that she was enjoying the food, the child stopped with the cup of in her hand and answered her with a look full of gratefulness. And this look awoke in her, awoke in this Mrs. Thompson, a new life, old human feelings, a new life, that is the old human feelings which she had, this old human feelings, she had this human feelings of tenderness and softness towards anyone who is sick or in sorrow, that had been slumbering in her heart. It was already there, this tenderness and softness was there, but it had been gone into deep sleep. Slumbering means deeply asleep in her heart for half a score of years. For how many? Score is 20 years and half a score is what? 10 years. So they were childless for 10 years. So now this human feelings, old human feelings which was already there in her heart had gone gone into deep sleep. Now with the look, Maggie's look and her voice of gratefulness made it awake again, and now we'll keep her a day or two longer. She is so weak and helpless, said Mrs. Joe Thompson in answer to her husband's remark at breakfast time on the next morning, that he must step down and see the guardians of the poor about Maggie. So at breakfast time the next day, the Mrs. Thompson tells that we are going to keep this child for a day or two because she is very weak. So she says she wants to keep Maggie for another 1 or 2 days, as she tells her husband that she is very weak. By the time you go to see for the guardians of the poor about Maggie, she'll be so much in your way, said Joe. And not the husband saying, well, she will be a trouble for you. She'll come and she'll be a great botheration for you on your way. I shan't mind it that for a day or two, poor thing. Now she's pitying Maggie and she's saying, poor thing, I don't mind for a day or two. So she's now showing that she is pitying Maggie. Joe did not see the guardians of the poor on that day. So Joe did not see the guardians of the poor on that day. So on that day, he did not see the guardians. On the next day, on the day following. So neither did he see the next day, neither did he see the guardians for the other following day, because in fact he never saw them at all on Maggie's account, for in less than a week Mrs. Joe Thompson would as soon leave thought of taking up her own abode in the almshouse as sending Maggie there. So almshouse, as I told you, it is meant for old, for old and poor. So she already tells her husband in breakfast time that she will be keeping, it would be good that Maggie should be kept for a day or two, as she is very weak in their own house, and that till he seeks for the guardians in the almshouse. But Joe also did not see the next day, neither did on the day following, and neither did he see any guardians for Maggie at all, because he saw that Mrs. Joe, her wife, had soon left the thought of taking her to the almshouse. So what light and blessing did that sick and helpless child bring to the home of Joe Thompson, the poor wheelwright? Now what a light! What light! There was darkness in the house without a child, and what blessing did this sick, helpless child brought into the homes of Joe and Thompson, the poor wheelwright. This poor wheelwright, Joe Thompson, now his house was lit up, and blessings, filled with blessings, just was brought by this sick and helpless child. It had been dark and cold and miserable there for a long time, just because his wife had nothing to love and care out of herself, and so became sore, irritable, ill-tempered, and self-afflicting in the desolation of a woman's nature. So now it had been really dark. Their house had been really dark, cold. When there is no love, there is only coldness, yes, and miserable. It was miserable. When there is no love, isn't it? A house is miserable, cold, and dark. For a long time, this was there. The house was cold, miserable, and dark, just because his wife had nothing to love. She had nobody to love, nobody to care out for herself. And so, when you have nothing like this, you are cold, you become irritated and ill-tempered and self-afflicting and causing pain or suffering to oneself in the desolation, that is in the loneliness of a woman's nature. So her nature as a woman, though a woman is considered to be very tender and loving, she had become very sore, irritable, and ill-tempered, and very, because of this loneliness, as in there was no one to love and care about. So now this sick, helpless child is there, has brought a blessing and light into their house, bringing, again, as I told you, the tender feelings of this woman, which was deep asleep, has now been awakened by this soft, beautiful child, that is sick and helpless child, that is Maggie. Now the sweetness of that sick child, looking ever to her in love, patience and gratitude, was as honey to her soul. Now the look of this child, the sweetness of this sick child, the look to her in love, the way she looked at her in love, patience and gratitude, it was just like a honey to her soul. And she carried her in her heart, as well as in her arms, a precious burden. So she now carries this sweet child in her heart. She has a place for her in her heart, this sweet child, and also she carries this invalid child in her arms, that is Maggie, a precious burden. Now you know why she is precious burden. Okay, though it's a burden that she cannot walk, but it's a burden, but it's a precious and a sweet burden. As for Joe Thompson, there was not a man in all the neighborhood who drank daily of a more precious wine of the life than he. So, and for Joe Thompson, how was it a blessing? There was no one in the surrounding, in the neighborhood, who was able to have a better drink or a better wine daily of a precious wine of life than he. He drank the most precious wine of life, and that is what? The love and sweetness of this Maggie, of the sick child. So it's considered to be the most precious wine which he drank, that of life. Okay, an angel had come into his house. So an angel had come into his house. Who was it? Who was this angel? It was Maggie, disguised as a sick, helpless and miserable child. So this angel was disguised as a sick, helpless and miserable child, and filled all his dreary chambers with the sunshine of love. And now this sick, helpless, miserable child who came as a disguise as an angel, now the house which was earlier cold and dark had now filled all its dreariest, dull chambers with sunshine of love. So now they are full of love. The house and the life of Mr. and Mrs. Thompson was full of love, was now filled with the sunshine of love. So the children, the story is over, but in my next class, because now I was recording the story, next class we have the question answer sessions, that is tomorrow, and any doubts from the workbook, please work out with all the question and answers. Is it clear, Ritika? Hello? Hello, Ritika? Ritika, are you Shivangi? Hello, Shivangi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
So I think something wrong with Ritika. So today I will hurry with the chapter. Tomorrow you can come up with, you have the whole day also, today and tomorrow till 1. You can finish your question answers. Any doubts you can ask me, but I am going to do a poem also tomorrow. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I would also like to know, when will I take your moral science classes? Please give me some time. I'll take half an hour only. That also I'm going to record. I think I'll see what I have to do it. So you will let me know in the WhatsApp group. Okay, thank you children.